the PDF version, but I think it's quite good in any case. Okay, just to explain, because this can be also helpful to better understand what the treaty is. You can hear that the treaty is a multilateral system to exchange the material. You can hear that the treaty is a benefit sharing fund or benefit sharing, monetary benefit sharing, no monetary benefit sharing derived from the use of the genetic resources. But I would say that the treaty is first and foremost the farmers' rights. Okay, first of all, to better understand what is farmers' rights, in 1983, there was an international undertaking. I saw that there is Guy Kastler here, is one of the probably the best person to ask about these years and what in the 1987 in FAO the farmers' rights, approached and in a working group, and was mentioned for the first time at that time in the negotiations. First, there was the attempt to recognize the farmers' rights and at least the farmers' contribution, the need to reward farmers for their contribution. The rights holders were not be single farmers or communities, but the entire peoples. And last but not least, there was an attempt to, to develop, I would say, a fund for the farmers and to balance the farmers and plant breeders' rights, trying to, to compete more or less with the formal sector. In the 1992, there was the Convention of Biological Diversity that was adopted. And together with the resolution in FAO, there was a kind of, I would say, negotiations for a legally binding international instrument in which there was the first attempt to include los derechos del agricultores, the farmers' rights. What is farmers' rights under the international treaty? Okay, let me tell you first of all that the most important part is also in the preamble of the treaty. There is the recognition here in the center of this picture, the recognition of the enormous contribution that the local and indigenous communities and farmers of all regions of the world have made and will continue to make for the conservation and development of plant genetic resources. So, in a nutshell, everything is contained not only in the treaty as per se, but also in the context of, the contribution of the local and indigenous communities, in which we can consider farmers as part of it. There is also the protection of traditional knowledge. There is an equitable participation in sharing benefits arising from the use of PGRFA, participation in making decisions. And last but not least, I would like to draw your attention on what farmers' rights meaning in practical terms: to save, use, exchange, and sell farmer safe seeds and propagated material. This is quite important because there is this last sentence in which many countries so far made, try not to be consistent and in compliance with the international treaty. And the sentence is subject to national law and as appropriate. This doesn't mean that the farmers' rights has not to be implemented. The farmers' rights has to be implemented at the national level, but subject to the national legislation. The other important thing I would like to discuss with you is more or less an historical overview, because through this, probably we can easily understand why farmers' rights is so relevant. Okay, I mentioned the 1983, so the first time in which farmers' rights was conceived as a concept. In the 88 and until 91, there was the Keystone Dialogues, a sort of open access, open discussion through which was launched more or less the idea to recognize the farmers' rights. And the FAO conference in the 1989 was acknowledged the importance of this concept. And finally, through 1990 until 1992, when the Convention on Biological Diversity entered into force, that was the first, I would say, trial to start the negotiation of the international undertaking, and the FAO conference request, to organize it, to provide a forum for negotiation of this international undertaking. In the 1996, there was the first global plan of action, and this is quite relevant for farmers' rights, because there was 196 contracting parties in FAO agreed that the conservation, sustainable use of plant genetic resources, capacity building, and training were important to implement the conservation at different levels, in situ, on farm, and ex situ. Again, in 2001, there was the adoption of the international treaty. There were different, governing bodies. To be honest, farmers' rights was immediately included as one of the most agenda items under the discussion at the GB2, GB3, GB4, and GB5. And there was in the middle a conference on farmers' rights in 2010, giving us some important elements discussed during the years up to now. The GB6 adopted one important resolution on farmers' rights, emphasizing the key role of the sustainable use of PGRFA. And finally, there was the first, I would say, important message in which conservation sustainable use cannot become, isolated, but have to be considered an entire package in which conservation, sustainable use, and farmers' rights can be managed by the contracting parties. There was the establishment in 2017 of the ad hoc technical expert group on farmers' rights. Some of you are part of this group. At the GB8, there was the presentation of the inventory of national measures, best practices, and lesson learned. In 2021, we launched, the Secretariat of the International Treaty launched the electronic versions of the inventory. It's a quite comprehensive database with more of 200 experiences collected from around the world. So it's an international, or I would say global experience on implementation of the farmers' rights. So why I talked so far about the, going through the historical view of farmers' rights, because the international treaty is a legally binding international agreement, is the only one in which there is a reference to the farmers' rights. I know that it's not perfect, but this is the base for various provisions to be implemented, take into account the farmers' rights as a base of work. I already mentioned the Article 5 and 6 and the preamble. What does it mean, farmers' rights, in practical way? First, to promote on-farm and in-situ conservation. A significant amount also of local crop diversity can be only maintained in the farmers' fields, and this has to be clear. We cannot say, and we cannot replace on-farm conservation with ex-situ conservation. It's something, you know, that we have to balance, and in particular, the synergy, we have to find the synergy between the ex-situ and the on-farm. On-farm management facilitates the continuous local adoption of farmers' varieties. There is also the attempt during these days, there is the meeting of the Commission of Genetic Resources. I saw in one of the I see, if I remember well, of yours, you know, publicity, that there will be an entire session of webinar dedicated about the Commission of Genetic Resources organized by Let's Liberate Diversity on next month. PGRFA is important as a live repository, reservoir, natural backup of ex-situ collection. And last but not least, promoting food sovereignty, culture and cultural diversity, and sustaining the role of farmers as custodians. There are many experiences that we collected in our inventory about that. The ad hoc technical expert group produced the inventory. Now, based on this inventory, is developing options for encouraging, guiding, and promoting the realization of farmers' rights. The expert group met 4 times in 4 years. It seems now more or less that the work has been finalized, despite there were some you know, difficulties on specific categories on legal measures, categories 10. But I think that this is, in particular, the inventory is a catalog of measures and practices that can be easily recognizable as one of the best collection we have ever made so far. There are different type of measures included in this inventory: technical, administrative, legal measures, and other measures when we cannot, you know, consider the measure provided, like a technical, administrative, and legal. Okay, these meetings have been held on May 2021 in last month, in August 2021, to try, you know, to find and to finalize the options, still remaining, as I said before, some already open. And I would like also to highlight the training materials. There is a new educational module on farmers' rights, and most probably there will be another one, including the inventory and the experiences. And if we are lucky and the expert group, and in particular the governing body, will endorse what the expert group has done so far, we will have also another additional educational module. There is also an interactive course version of this module available in the Informia portal, and other modules that you can find in our webpage. It's quite also interesting that the submission by contracting parties and stakeholders are another source of views, experiences, lessons learned in implementing the Article 9. This online inventory version is already available, so you are really invited to go through it in the treaty webpage. I think that this is that's all. An invitation is to continue sharing your example of measures and best practices and lessons learned from the realization of farmers' rights, and we are confident that we can receive them in the next in the next years. Thank you so much for your attention.